My name is Isla Warren. I am 36. I serve as a major in U.S. Army Cyber Defense. I keep my voice calm because calm is what holds when a room starts to shake. The room I am in is windowless. Badges swipe, cameras tilt. This is the Pentagon, a secure demo for a battlefield encryption system that my older brother Ethan claims is unbreakable. He sees me in the back row. A smile touches one side of his mouth. He leans toward the microphone and says, "Just listen. Do not talk." I sit with my hands on a narrow notebook. My chair is close to the wall. I count the exits. Old habits steady my breathing. Generals fill the first row. Contractors in perfect suits fill the second. A CID observer stands by a side door with a tablet. He does not clap. A slide glows behind Ethan. It promises quantum-safe layers and adaptive self-healing. It promises more than any honest engineer should promise. He basks in it. Pride is a siren. I have buried soldiers who chased its song. He follows his script, charts, confidence, that thin smile toward me again. He knows what I do. He knows the parts of the network that sleep only when I do. He also knows our history, and he wants the room to know it. The prodigy little sister should sit down and watch. The system is unhackable, he says. The phrase is heavy in a military building. It begs to be tested, and it dares anyone to try. I do not rise. I listen. I keep my eyes on the code fragments that strobe across the screen like fireflies over dark grass. Patterns whisper. My pen stays closed. Applause flares like small brush fires. I tighten my left hand once and release. The nerves quiet. He repeats his promise. He taps the slide. He praises his team. A colonel nods. A deputy assistant secretary leans forward. A camera clicks. Badges shimmer under the lights. The room is ready to be impressed. It is also ready to be fooled. There is another memory burning under this one. It does not ask permission to surface. My father's memorial, a chapel thick with flowers, suits and murmurs. My sister across the aisle raising her phone. My watch buzzes. A text from my husband, a naval officer. Do not react. Your sister is recording you. I keep smiling. I scan the faces. I text him one code word. Raven. 10 seconds later, a dozen men in plain suits stand. Their posture is unmistakable. His SEAL team, disguised as guests. A quiet perimeter forms. The room learns what real control looks like. The lesson is simple. Do not threaten family and expect the uniforms to sit still. The Pentagon returns. Ethan advances to his final slide. A string of symbols. It hangs in the air like a banner. The experts clap hard. Unhackable floats again. I watch in silence because silence serves me. I am not here to be clever. I am here to be correct. Ethan looks at me. His chin lifts. He savors the stage. Just listen, he says. Do not talk. My pulse does not change. I think of the chaplain's carpet. My husband's single word. The way a room can pivot in a breath when someone who is ready does the one prepared thing. 5 seconds. That is all I will need when my moment comes. I feel the CID observer watching me. He keeps his face wooden, his pen still. He wants to see if I jump. He wants to test whether I blow a whistle or blow the timing. I stay anchored. In every operation there is a hinge. You wait for it. You move only when the hinge turns. Ethan opens his hands, palms out. The gesture of a man who believes the verdict has been rendered. Generals nod. Some make notes like a decision is closing. I place my notebook on my thigh. I set my heel under my chair. I inventory the single symbol on the screen that does not belong in a serious cipher. It belongs in a Sunday riddle. I let the recognition settle like a coin in a fountain. Then I lift my chin. The hinge has turned. The room just does not know it yet. The lights hum, the air tastes like copper. A printer in the corridor chokes, then resumes. Small sounds announce big turns. I breathe once, count to 3. Press my thumb against the spiral of my notebook. The last slide freezes. Rows of symbols pretend to be a cipher. A real cipher has balance. This one wears a child's grin. The pattern lands. The past steps forward. Sunday mornings at our kitchen table were quiet. My mother unfolded the paper. She traced a finger over the puzzles and left the cryptic symbols for us. Ethan was older. He wanted speed and victory. I wanted the click of the right key in the right lock. Sometimes I won, sometimes I did not. The feeling mattered when letters stood up and made sense. My mother would say, "You can see it if you look with both eyes and with your heart." Ethan would say, "Winners do not need advice." That same substitution sits on the screen, dressed in military blue. A sun shape stands where an O should be. A broken arrow stands where an N should be. A square with a notch stands where an E should be. Strip the costume and the first row says, "Open the gate." I time my breath while applause washes the room. I stand, knees steady, shoulders down, voice level. "Sir, permission to speak freely." The session chair, a 3-star with a hard mouth, gives me a single nod. "Proceed, Major." I step into the center aisle where the light is white and the carpet is tight under my boot. I raise my hand. I do not point at my brother. I point at the third symbol. That is not a code. It is a children's riddle. The first line reads, "Open the gate." It takes 5 seconds if you grew up on crosswords and a mother who liked quiet victories. A laugh snorts from the back and dies. The 3-star tilts toward the screen. He compares shapes to a quick reference in the packet. His mouth closes on a syllable. He says, "She is correct." The room compresses. A collective heartbeat chooses to race or freeze. Ethan does not move for 2 counts. Then his jaw tightens. Then his hands find each other and clasp. Unhackable loses light. The word becomes a question. The CID observer watches the contractors who sign the testing affidavits. I keep my voice low. The demo string is basic substitution. The so-called noise layer preserves position. The symbol repeats every 4th place. A capable adversary could farm the pattern in under an hour and pivot into command channels. I do not say, "My brother should have known better." I do not say, "Never sell pride in this building." I let the facts walk. Ethan tries to smile. He says the string is a decoy. The real core is deeper. The unhackable claim refers to architecture, not the on-screen sample. The chair does not blink. "Then show us the core," he says. Ethan does not move. Silence makes honest men look doubtful, and others look worse. He swallows once. Heat gathers at my neck. I recheck exits. I measure the distance to my brother's eyes. In them I see the boy from Sunday mornings. I see the man who took my name off holiday invitations. I see someone who wanted so badly to be undeniable that he stopped letting evidence speak. I do not hate him. I hold the line. The chair clears his throat. "Major Warren, thank you. Please return to your seat." He turns to the CID observer. "Captain, note the discrepancy. Place a hold on any fielding decision pending independent review." The observer nods once and writes a time. Somewhere a calendar entry is being pulled back from a date it should never have reached. I walk down the aisle. The carpet grip eases. The air cools. Ethan keeps his face composed, the kind of composure that cracks after doors close. I sit. My notebook rests on my thigh. I breathe in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. 5 seconds open the gate. The rest will take longer and it will take law. That is fine. I have patience. I learned it at a kitchen table where a mother made us earn our victories with quiet hands. The CID captain starts notes. His tablet shows a hold. The posture of the room drops as authority moves. Several heads turn. None of that changes facts. I steady my breath. I let my hands rest open on my notebook as if I am finished. I am not finished. Ethan's face holds while his eyes move. He looks at the contractors, at the 3-star, at me, last. There is a plea there a sister would notice, not mercy. A way out that preserves the stage he built. I cannot give him that. Law and process are the only rescues that matter in this building. Anything gentler rots the beams. The chair calls a recess. The room breaks in clumps of quiet voices. A colonel passes. His eyes say enough. 2 contractors take a side door and vanish. The CID captain follows without hurry. I stay seated. I will not give a camera the image of a woman in uniform checking a private screen after calling a system into question. A young lieutenant slides a water bottle onto my desk. I do not drink. Cold water can shake a hand that must hold steady. Ethan steps down with the careful gait men use when a cliff sits at their feet. He veers toward me, stops a yard short. He says nothing, I say nothing. We listen to air handlers. His mouth opens, closes. He moves away. I let the distance stay. I look at the frozen symbols. I think of my father's memorial and the one word I sent to my husband. I think of how a room flips when truth and timing agree. A hinge has turned here as well. What follows will be hours, not seconds. Documents, not claims. Sworn statements, not slides. I am ready. The game my brother started with a taunt will end in a ledger. I prefer ledgers. They remember what applause forgets. I straighten my jacket, center the name tape with 2 fingers, count to 4, let the count reset. Discipline is a shelter, so is truth. Both are heavier than pride, always. I grew up in a small 2-story house with peeling white paint on the porch rail and a yard just big enough for 2 kids to race each other without turning a corner. My parents believed in filling that house with books and questions. The television was small. The library card was worn. At the dinner table, you could talk about anything as long as you could explain why you thought it was true. My father encouraged debate. My mother encouraged patience. Both believed that learning was the only inheritance that could not be stolen. Ethan was 4 years older than me. To a little sister, that gap felt like a gulf. He was always ahead, taller, faster, already knowing things I had to struggle to learn. From my earliest memories, he wanted to win at everything. A game of checkers was not over until he had every one of my pieces. A race was not worth running unless he crossed the line with his hands in the air. He hated the idea of a tie. He hated the idea of me catching up. On Sunday mornings, my mother would unfold the newspaper on the kitchen table. The smell of coffee and toast would drift in from the stove. She would turn to the puzzle page and smooth it flat with her palm. There were crosswords, word jumbles, and at the bottom of the page, a line of strange symbols. Circles, triangles, arrows, stars, standing in for letters. It was called a cryptogram, though I didn't know the name at first. To me, it was just the most interesting part of the page. Ethan would pull the paper toward him, pencil already in hand. He attacked puzzles like they were sprints. Quick marks, erasures, more quick marks. I watched the way his brow furrowed and his jaw set. Sometimes he got it first, sometimes he didn't. The days I solved it before him were the days his smile vanished. He would glance at me with something harder than disappointment, like I had stolen more than an answer. My mother noticed. She noticed everything. She would pour him more orange juice and say gently, "You'll get it next time." To me, she would lean close and whisper, "You can solve it if you look with both eyes, and with your heart." I didn't understand at first. Both eyes meant paying attention to every detail. With your heart meant slowing down enough to see what mattered and what didn't. I was a child. I thought puzzles were about answers. She was teaching me they were also about the way you look at the problem. That became our quiet ritual. Ethan and I would sit at the kitchen table, the cryptogram between us, the pencil moving back and forth. He liked to guess quickly, filling in what looked right. I liked to hunt for the one symbol that appeared in 3 different places. The one that might stand for E or A, the one that could unlock the rest. When I found it, there was a click in my mind, the satisfying sense of a lock turning. I would write the letters in, and the message would bloom across the page. On those mornings, victory felt warm to me, but cold to him. His sigh was louder than it needed to be. He would push back from the table and walk out to the yard, leaving me with the paper and my mother's small, proud smile. I tried to share credit. We both worked on it, but he never accepted that. To him, winning was singular. Sharing was losing. The same pattern played out in school. If a teacher praised my project, he would make sure his next one was bigger. If I earned a good grade, he would remind me his was higher last year. He was not cruel, not exactly. But every compliment I received seemed to land on him like a challenge. I learned to work quietly, to keep some of my victories to myself. Yet the Sunday puzzle stayed a battleground neither of us could give up. The cryptograms became more complex as we got older, the symbols more obscure. My mother never stopped setting the paper in front of us. She never stopped saying the same thing. Both eyes and your heart. Those words became my private compass. They meant see the obvious and the hidden. They meant consider the facts and the feelings. They meant understand the person across from you as well as the problem between you. Ethan heard the same words, but I don't think he ever took them in. For him, puzzles were just competitions. For me, they became a way to understand people, systems, and the quiet flaws that could open any locked door. By the time I was 12, I could outpace him on most puzzles. By the time I was 16, I could decode them in my head without writing down the key. He stopped sitting at the table with me on Sundays. He said he was busy. I knew he was tired of losing. That unspoken truth settled between us, small but sharp, like a splinter no one bothers to remove. Looking back now, I see how those mornings were the blueprint for everything that came later. The competition was never just about puzzles. It was about control, about who would be seen as the smarter one, the stronger one, the one who deserved the spotlight. My mother's lesson stayed with me long after the puzzles stopped. I carried it into every classroom, every briefing, every secure server room. And standing in that Pentagon auditorium years later, with Ethan on the stage and a string of symbols behind him, I knew I was seeing the same game in a different arena. The rules hadn't changed. Neither had I. I did not see how far the gap would open until the year our paths split. I accepted an appointment to a military academy for cyber operations. The oath tasted like iron. Dawn belonged to drill, afternoons to calculus and systems architecture, nights to the lab where we learned to think like an intruder and close the door. I liked the rigor, I liked quiet work and trust. Ethan chose civil engineering at a state university. He loved structures with names on plaques. He joined design teams for competitions. He mastered dinners and slide decks. Calls grew shorter. When I spoke about cryptography labs or a radio's capstone, his voice carried a bright edge. Real engineering pours concrete, he said. Code is easy to fake because you cannot see it. Commissioning day came. My parents pinned my bars. My mother's hands steadied. My father stood as his back allowed. I reported to a cyber defense unit and learned the job. Inside classified rooms, alarms do not care about grades. 3 months in, I traced movement through a logistics network and cut it off before it touched flight plans. The after-action read intervention prevented mission degradation. My commander handed me a coin. I sent a photo to the family thread. Ethan replied, "Congrats. Must have been basic if a junior officer got it." I told myself he was teasing. It did not feel like a joke. The next holiday he skipped. A text said, "Crunch." My mother set his plate. The chair stayed empty. His career moved fast. A defense contractor recruited him before he finished grad school. He liked the pace and the glow. He sent shots of glossy lobbies and demo days. He wrote that it mattered. When I asked what he solved, he said confidential and changed the subject. My path made me smaller on the outside and broader inside. I learned to brief without adjectives, to keep receipts, to treat humility like a firewall. The unit placed me on a red team rotation. I wrote reports that did not blame or blink. In a joint exercise, I led an overnight fix. The commander sent a handwritten note I keep safe. Ethan studied my record like graffiti on a wall he had painted. When I earned a fellowship in applied cryptography, he sent clippings on failed programs with the caption, "Do not become this." When I declined a panel at his company, he told our parents I was antisocial. I said I was staying in my lane. My mother asked us to listen with both eyes. My father asked for peace. The peace thinned. Invitations began to skip my name. A cousin's party included everyone but me. The reason given was security. At Thanksgiving, Ethan arrived late. He avoided my chair. He told a story about rescuing a contractor after a tester missed a flaw. The table laughed. My mother did not. I rinsed dishes and stayed quiet. Some battles you win by never drawing a sword. By the time I rotated to headquarters, the family thread was photos and weather. Ethan announced a promotion with a caption about leading where it counts. The image behind him said, "Unbreakable engine." I felt a storm's edge. I sent, "Proud of you," no reply. Hoped anyway, quietly. Work steadied me. I mentored a lieutenant with sharp questions. We built checklists catching small sins early. A recruiter called with a salary that sounded like a dare. I stayed. Service is a room where you measure worth. I did not know how directly our lines would cross. He carried his hunger into a program that called itself unhackable. I carried my mother's sentence into the same room. Each of us brought the habits that defined us. One demanded applause. One waited for the hinge to turn. When it did, every quiet Sunday lesson rose to meet it and hold its weight. Morning came with a vibration on my secure phone. An unknown Pentagon extension flashed, followed by a short formal voice identifying CID. Major Warren, we are issuing a temporary compartmented clearance addendum for you. Attend a technical demonstration at the Pentagon at 0900. Purpose: observe. No questions, no slide access, no recording. I confirmed with a single yes, copied the reference number, and opened my safe to pull the credentials I would need. The email landed 30 seconds later, stark and precise, with a route, a room, and a contact captain whose signature contained no adornment. I stood in my kitchen and let the coffee grow cold. Observe is a narrow word in CID language. It often means they suspect a gap between what is on a slide and what is on a server. It also means they trust your eyes more than they trust the room. I ironed my jacket, checked the name tape, placed my notebook in the inner pocket. On my way out, I texted my mother's line from memory, like a private blessing. Both eyes, and your heart. The elevator mirrors gave me back a steady face. Whatever was happening, I would finally see it now. Ethan stood under the flat, cold lights, a navy suit pressed sharp enough to cut. He spoke with the pacing of a man convinced every syllable was gold. Multi-layer encryption, he began, letting the phrase hang just long enough for the brass in the front row to nod. Adaptive defense protocols that learn from each breach attempt. His tone had the rhythm of a marketing reel. The screen behind him pulsed with diagrams and animated shields. I kept my pen still in my lap. The phrases were familiar, but not in the way he wanted. I had seen them before, on slides written by contractors trying to sell time, not security. He said quantum resistant twice without context. He stacked acronyms like sandbags, hoping the wall would look solid from far away. To the untrained ear, it sounded airtight. To me, it sounded like a drum, loud, polished, but hollow. When the slides turned to architecture maps, I leaned forward. The lines were clean, but the logic flow was too predictable. No system is without a seam, yet here he claimed they had sealed everyone. My eyes caught on a specific subroutine name, buried in the left-hand margin, one that looked too much like an old civilian encryption library with a cosmetic rename. That was not just lazy, it was dangerous. He pivoted to automated key rotation with a flourish, as if turning the word into theater would make it bulletproof. I watched the generals lean forward, the younger ones scribbling notes. I understood the seduction, I had seen it before, but the deeper I listened, the more the language itself became a flag. He spoke about layering defenses, but never addressed what the defenses were actually protecting. Like paint on rotting wood, it gleams until the first hard knock. The final minutes built toward the crown jewel, an animated sequence of the system rejecting intrusion attempts in real time. I recognized the pattern on the intrusion stream. It was a pre-scripted load of outdated test code, safe for a show, but worthless as proof. The audience didn't know. Applause built like a wave. Ethan smiled in that old way, the one that meant he thought the world was already in his hands. I didn't move. Not yet. When the applause ebbed, the room loosened. Chairs scraped. Side conversations began. Ethan stepped down from the stage, flanked by 2 company reps. He scanned the crowd like a man drinking in his own victory. I stayed seated, writing the last few lines in my notebook. He passed within arm's reach, his eyes catching mine for a fraction of a second, long enough to tighten his jaw. "No one needs you here," he said, low enough that only I could hear. No pause, no change in stride. Just that line, dropped like a stone in cold water. I closed my notebook without looking up. CID's liaison captain had been standing against the far wall, watching both of us. When Ethan vanished into a knot of handshakes, the captain moved to my side. "Major," he said, voice neutral. "What did you see?" It was not a request for a full report. They wanted a compass bearing, not a map. I kept my answer short. "An open door." His eyebrow twitched, not surprise, more like confirmation. "We'll be in touch," he said, and walked away, leaving me with the noise of the crowd and the weight of what I had just named. Ethan was already deep in conversation with a two-star general, his laugh carrying over the hum. He never glanced back. I stood, smoothed my jacket, and made my way to the exit. The smell of coffee from the hallway cart was sharp against the recycled air. I took a cup, knowing the real work would not be in the report, but in what would happen before the ink was dry. Walking toward the elevator, I let the edges of the scenario play out in my mind. If this system went live in an operational theater, the flaw I had seen was not just a matter of embarrassment. It would be a breach into the bloodstream of our tactical networks. Positions, supply lines, mission timing, all exposed. The right adversary could dismantle a campaign without firing a shot. In my world, that kind of failure didn't just cost promotions, it cost people. And Ethan, for all his pride, had either missed it or buried it. I couldn't decide which possibility was worse. By the time the elevator doors closed, I knew this was no longer a family rift with professional edges. It was a fault line in the ground we both stood on, and one tremor could bring the whole structure down. Back in my apartment, the city outside was a wash of sodium light and winter haze. I set my coffee beside the laptop and logged into the secure network CID had granted me for analysis purposes. Their phrasing was careful, but I knew the truth. They wanted me to do what I'd always done: find the cracks no one else wanted to admit existed. The data dump was larger than I expected. Technical diagrams, meeting transcripts, internal memos, budget revisions, even casual email threads between project engineers. I started with the architecture files, cross-referencing each module name with known encryption libraries. That's when the first shadow fell across the clean paper trail. One of the core security modules, the very one Ethan had touted as a proprietary breakthrough, was, in fact, an old codebase, licensed from a small subcontractor out of Nevada. On its own, that wasn't illegal. But the subcontractor was not on the approved list for classified systems. And worse, their product had failed the Department of Defense's own security audit 18 months ago. I pulled the audit file, and there it was in black and white. Severe vulnerabilities in key management, susceptible to timing attacks. Then came the emails. Buried in an exchange between Ethan and the subcontractor's lead developer was a single line that chilled me. "We'll skip the Phase 4 penetration testing to meet the deployment date. Trust me, it'll be fine." Phase 4 was the mandatory stress test stage for any military tech handling operational intelligence. Skipping it wasn't a shortcut. It was a breach of protocol so serious it bordered on criminal negligence. I scrolled deeper. Internal status reports had been updated after submission. Minor language tweaks that turned potential vulnerability into acceptable operational risk. Someone was laundering the language to keep the funding pipeline open. The author tags on those changes? Ethan's. The more I read, the clearer it became. This wasn't oversight. This was design. He'd cut the corners himself, hidden the seams under layers of jargon, and moved forward as if the system were bulletproof. He wasn't just risking the mission, he was risking lives. I sat back, rubbing my eyes, hearing my mother's voice in memory. You can't just solve the puzzle. You have to know why it was built. Ethan's why had nothing to do with safety. It was ambition, pure, blinding ambition. And if I was right, his unhackable system was nothing more than a beautiful door with the lock installed backwards. Now I had to prove it in a way no one could ignore. 2 mornings later, an encrypted bulletin slid into my inbox from a contact still inside the Joint Technology Approval Board. The subject line was simple: final review date set. The body confirmed what I'd feared. The system would be formally approved in 2 weeks for deployment in a classified overseas operation. 2 weeks. That wasn't just a deadline. It was a fuse already burning. Once deployed, the system would be integrated into active command channels. Pulling it out afterward would be like trying to swap a parachute mid-fall. I built my workspace into a war room. Screens tiled with side-by-side comparisons of the original module code, the subcontractor's audit failures, and the doctored project reports. I documented every deviation, timestamp, and signature. Each piece had to be airtight, not just compelling to CID, but admissible in court-martial proceedings, if it came to that. The military didn't act on suspicions. It acted on proof that could survive the weight of bureaucracy and the precision of cross-examination. I requested archived meeting recordings from the project's early days, listening to Ethan's voice slide between charm and authority. He pushed timelines, redirected questions about security reviews, and leaned hard on the need for rapid deployment. In one clip, when a junior engineer raised the audit failure, Ethan laughed it off. "We're not building Fort Knox here, we're building a tool. There's a difference." That line went into the file. I printed nothing. Every artifact was secured in triple encrypted drives, mirrored in an off-site CID vault. I'd been in the game long enough to know that when you push against someone with rank and reputation, they push back hard. And Ethan, for all his sibling resentment, would not hesitate to come for me if he sensed what I was building. Every hour was measured, mornings for technical analysis, afternoons for corroborating evidence with CID's intel team, nights for drafting the narrative in language the brass couldn't ignore. I was no longer just a sister cleaning up a mess. I was an officer with a duty to stop a breach before it became a disaster. The clock didn't tick, it roared in my ears. It was close to midnight when I walked into CID's secure evidence room, a steel vault that hummed faintly from the servers lining its walls. The officer on duty was a major I knew by reputation, sharp, methodical, and allergic to anything that smelled like rumor. I slid the encrypted drive across the table. "Chain of custody starts now," I said. He plugged it in, glanced at the directory tree, and gave a low whistle. "This is thorough." "It has to be," I replied. "There's no margin for doubt." He studied me for a moment, then said, "If this checks out, his career is finished. You understand that?" "I do." My voice didn't shake. "Even if he's your brother?" I held his gaze. "Especially if he's my brother. The rank doesn't matter, the uniform doesn't matter. What matters is the lives at the other end of that system." He nodded once, logged the receipt, and locked the drive into the vault. As the door sealed with a hydraulic hiss, I felt the strange stillness of a step taken that could never be walked back. The fuse was still burning, but now someone else was watching the fire. The hearing room had no windows, only the seal on the wall, a row of flags, and a red recorder light no bigger than a grain of rice. No press, no gallery, no show. Ethan sat at one end with company counsel on his right and a program liaison on his left. I sat near the center with the CID major. Our binders were heavier than they looked. Across from us, 5 officers waited behind neat stacks of paper. Rank ran from colonel to lieutenant general. The chair reminded us of classification rules, decorum, and the penalties for careless speech. Ethan offered the clean story. Milestones met, costs contained, schedule intact. He called the system resilient and layered. The word unbreakable did not appear because a transcript would hold him to it. He leaned on urgency. He leaned on theater. The panel let him speak until the polish sounded like fog. Counsel added that industry best practices had been followed. The liaison nodded when required and avoided hard nouns. The chair turned to me. "Provide an overview, Major." I kept it spare. I traced the module lineage to a subcontractor that failed a Department of Defense audit. I showed the risk report edits that turned potential vulnerability into acceptable operational risk. I identified the missing Phase 4 penetration test. Each assertion had a timestamp and a signature. I slid documents across, one at a time, and let paper click on wood. A brigadier general asked his questions cleanly. Could the edits be clerical? Could the skip test be scheduling friction? Could the subcontractor have remediated code since the audit? I answered with artifacts. If clerical, the original phrase would appear elsewhere. It did not. If scheduling, a reschedule ticket would exist. It did not. If remediation, the changelog would show a new build. It did not. He wrote a small mark and looked at Ethan. Company counsel tried to widen the lens. He suggested my relation to Ethan created bias. The chair shut that door with one palm. Chain of custody is CID. The evidence stands or falls on merit. Counsel pivoted to urgency. Operations needed capabilities sooner than policy allowed. An operations colonel answered before I could. Urgency compresses sequences, but never deletes gates. The sentence landed. The chair looked at me again. Major Warren, are you sure? I let the quiet strip the room and answered the way I have trained to answer. If I were not 100% sure, I would not be here. The legal advisor did not look at me. The CID major noted the time. Ethan stared at his hands as if they could supply a better truth. Ethan asked to address the panel. Permission granted. He said he had trusted his team. He said the demo string was a decoy. He said the final build would have passed every test. The chair asked where the build was. Ethan offered funding cycles and delivery pressure. He did not offer documentation. He glanced at me on a line that had once been a bridge. It held no weight now. We took a recess in a narrow hallway with a metal urn and stale coffee. Ethan came without counsel. "You could have brought this to me," he said. I kept my hands at my sides. I brought it to the process that protects people who will never know our names. He said family counted. I said that is why I did not let you ship a flaw into a war. We returned. The panel asked me to explain the timing side channel in plain language for the record. I said imagine a lock that fails faster when a wrong key is close. A patient thief measures failure time and reconstructs the combination. They asked Ethan who signed risk acceptance when Phase 4 vanished. He said the program office. The liaison did not confirm. The silence pressed like a closing door. The chair read the discrepancies aloud. He thanked us for candor. He said the panel would advise command by end of day. There were no closing statements. The recorder light went dark and the room exhaled. We stood. Ethan did not. He watched the grain of the table as if it could dissolve into a map with a kinder route. I adjusted my jacket, centered my name tape, and walked toward the corridor where the air was colder. The hinge had turned. The next sound would be the latch. The panel did not keep us waiting. A staff sergeant opened the door and called us back to the table. The recorder light blinked red. The chair spoke like a man reading a verdict already written. Based on the record, based on the evidence, based on sworn statements, the panel recommends immediate suspension of all fielding activities for the system under review. He turned to my brother. Effective today, your top secret clearance is revoked pending adjudication. You are relieved of program duties. You will report to your parent organization for reassignment pending further action. Ethan's jaw tightened, then set. Company counsel whispered, but the chair kept going. The liaison shifted in his chair. The chair addressed him next. The government will issue a stop work order to the prime contractor. All subcontractors will be notified. All data will be sequestered under CID control. Deliverables will be preserved for forensic analysis. Any pending approvals are canceled. He looked down the line of officers. Any objections? None were voiced. A colonel read process failures into the record. The missing Phase 4 test was not administrative friction. It was a deliberate bypass. Risk language had been altered after concurrence. Signatures had been copied forward from earlier drafts. The subcontractor's module had not been remediated. The audit failures still stood. His voice carried the weight of people who know what a weak lock costs. Company counsel asked for leniency, citing operational urgency and reputational harm. The operations colonel answered with a flat sentence. Reputations are not protection systems. Soldiers are. The legal advisor reminded the room that speed cannot legitimize non-compliance. The liaison stared at the tabletop and said nothing. The chair turned to me once. "Major Warren, the panel appreciates your clarity and restraint." I nodded. The record did not need my voice again. My part was finished. The rest belonged to the machine that grinds slow and certain. He addressed Ethan again. "The panel finds that your actions introduced unacceptable risk to operational networks and attempted to conceal that risk in official documentation. This breaches the duty of stewardship required of program leadership. Accordingly, the panel recommends demotion, removal from any leadership billet, mandatory retraining, and a review of eligibility for future access to classified programs after adjudication." The words hit like cold iron. Ethan sat still. Counsel leaned close and said nothing the recorder would capture. The chair read the recommendation concerning the prime contractor. Due to failure to enforce testing gates, due to the use of unapproved subcontractors, due to material misrepresentation in reports, the government will terminate the contract for default. The stop work order will remain until termination actions are complete. Any derived systems will be evaluated separately. None will be fielded without fresh testing in full compliance with policy. Somewhere beyond the walls, calendars were being cleared and meetings erased. The recorder clicked as the chair invited final procedural questions. A staff judge advocate outlined next steps: privilege review, referral decisions, administrative sanctions, potential criminal exposure if intent could be proved. No voices rose. Decisions had already been made where they always are in this building, in page counts and signatures and missing tickets that should exist but do not. We stood when the panel did. The room exhaled, colder now. I let Ethan pass. He did not look at me, his gaze fixed on a strip of floor tile, as if a second door might open and offer a kinder answer. Counsel gathered folders with careful hands. The liaison left quickly, phone already in hand, face set to neutral. I watched the doors slide shut and saw my reflection. Not victorious, not vindicated, steady. The decision felt inevitable from the moment I saw that string of symbols wearing a uniform it did not deserve. Revocation, demotion, termination, suspension. Those are institutional tools, not trophies. They protect people who never sit in rooms like this. That is the point. Now, when the building swallowed the last echo, what remained was not relief. It was a clean, hard space where the noise had been. Revenge is supposed to taste sweet. This tasted like cold water after a fire. I had done my duty. I had protected people who would never know my name. I had watched my brother absorb a blow he built with his own hands. The two truths sat side by side and refused to merge. I stood in that space and let it be what it was. Not triumph, not grief. The cost of choosing law over blood. The news moved faster than any official memo. It flowed through classified chat rooms, hallway whispers, and the invisible wires that bind a base together. By noon the next day, people who had not been in the room spoke like they had sat 2 chairs from the microphone. Some called me steady, some called me ruthless. A program manager I hardly knew stopped by my office. He lowered his voice and said, "Major, you saved us from a headline that begins with breach. Thank you." An engineer from a sister unit sent a 1-line note. "Next time, bring popcorn." I deleted that one. Courage was not the word on every tongue. An anonymous post on a community bulletin called me a traitor to blood. The phrase was neat. The intent was not. At lunch, a captain asked if I had considered family reconciliation. He did not ask whether the system could have failed in theater. A contractor muttered as I passed in the corridor. He used the old epithet for snitches and believed the fluorescent lights hid him. I kept my pace. I have no interest in sermons delivered over paper cups and vending machines. Praise arrived in quieter forms. My old squad leader, Santos, texted from a training range. "You did the right thing. They will not forget." His words framed both edges of the day. I screenshotted the message and slid the phone back into the drawer. A civilian analyst left a note under my keyboard. "Thank you for defending the test gates. We write them for reasons people forget when money is close." There is a specific gratitude in that sentence, the kind that has watched budgets try to eat certainty for breakfast more than once. The controversy sharpened when 2 rumors collided. The first claimed I had leaked proprietary methods to a competing vendor. The tale was detailed, which is the same as saying inventive. The second argued I had acted out of sibling spite. Strangers told each other a story that began at a childhood kitchen table and ended at a classified podium, as if gossip could write doctrine. CID issued a brief internal reminder that retaliation is prohibited. Retaliation did not read the memo. Leadership handled it like professionals. They were precise and reserved. My commander spoke to me privately, his tone stayed level. "You followed the process. Keep following it. Do not answer what the record can answer better." He reassigned a pair of vocal contractors to a different floor and scheduled a security culture refresher for the building. None of that changed the temperature when the elevator doors opened. A chill met me at least as often as a nod. I kept working. I taught a morning brief on timing attacks to a room that included 2 people who would not meet my eyes. I wrote after action notes as if no one would ever read them. In this line of work, that is the only way to make sure everyone reads them when it counts. I left out adjectives and included diagrams. I answered every question with receipts. It is dull work to some. To me, it is the craft that keeps airplanes full of soldiers on the right path home. At night, I ran the river trail and rewound the hearing in my head. I checked the hinge moments for pride and found procedure instead. I slept lightly and woke early. I ironed my jacket and centered the name tape with 2 fingers, the old ritual that keeps my hands honest. The rumor mill is a weather system. You cannot beat it by yelling into the wind. You outlast it by tending the roof, fixing the gutters, and letting time expose the leaks in other people's stories. A junior lieutenant approached me outside the SIF and asked if I regretted anything. I said I regretted that the decision landed on family. I did not regret protecting soldiers I will never meet. He nodded once, a real nod. Then he asked for a copy of my checklist for evidence collection. That was the first clean breath I had taken in 2 days. I emailed it to him. The email from Ethan arrived 3 days later under a subject that gave nothing away. Update. The body was spare, a single paragraph with no greetings and no sign-off. Maybe you always saw what I missed. Maybe this time you saved more than pride. Do not contact me. I read it twice, then archived it without reply. Relief did not come. I felt dull thud of a bridge dismantled plank by plank. That afternoon, an industry blog ran a piece that tried to stitch a narrative out of rumor and bravado. Anonymous sources suggested a rival vendor had fed me evidence. Someone else hinted that I had carried a private grudge into a secure room. The post wrapped itself in fairness language and printed every insinuation it could harvest. My name did not appear, my silhouette did. Within an hour, the link bounced across private threads. A contractor stopped me near the elevator and asked if I liked ruining careers. I told him careers ruin themselves when they step on people they cannot see. In a staff meeting, a major I respected cleared his throat and addressed the room without saying my name. We police ourselves because the mission requires it. If you cannot accept that, you cannot sit at this table. The temperature shifted, a few chairs straightened, nobody spoke. Afterward, he asked if I wanted him to call out the blog. I said no. Starving a fire beats fanning it. The controversy found another angle. A podcast host claimed the stop work order would delay a critical operation overseas and cost lives. Cause and effect were arranged to sell outrage. Operations weighed in with a short signed memo. The planned fielding window had been a soft target date. Contingency communications remained intact. The pause did not jeopardize troops. That night, I reread the hearing transcript. I checked my statements for heat and found none. I replayed Ethan's face, the jaw set, the eyes that would not settle. We had been 2 kids at a table once. We had grown into our habits. He told rooms what they wanted to hear. I told rooms what they needed to know. That is not a moral. It is a map. Santos called during my run and kept it blunt. The room will forget the headline faster than it forgets that you made people choose. Some of them liked being told they were safe. Now they have to rebuild the comfort they bought on credit. Let them. Keep your receipts. Keep your watch set 5 minutes fast. He hung up before I could answer. The river kept its slow muscle under the bridge. I matched its pace until my breath steadied. 2 days later, the first formal thank you arrived where I least expected it. A terse note from an operations planner I had never met. Your evidence prevented a bad integration. We adjusted timelines. No mission impact. That sentence held more air than a paragraph of flattery. I shredded it after logging the acknowledgement. Paper is a liability. Meaning is what remains. At week's end, the blog issued a correction so narrow it could not cover the smear it had spread. I did not read it. I trained a new analyst on audit trails. We worked through 3 case studies and built a checklist he could hold. Before he left, he asked how to handle noise. You make time your ally, I said. You let the record carry the weight. You do not try to carry it yourself. He nodded and wrote that down. I believed he would keep it. Friday ended. The building exhaled. Lights dimmed. Screens went to sleep. I sat at my desk and let the quiet arrive. Victory belongs to games. This was not a game. Ethan's email rested in the archive. The blog's correction faded somewhere unvisited. The memo lived in a file that would never see daylight. What remained was duty, the slow work of showing up clean tomorrow. I locked my drawer and touched my name tape, both eyes and my heart. Then I walked out into the cold and chose steadiness again for now. A year passed in the steady cadence of duty. Checklists, briefs, quiet corridors that know how to keep a secret. When spring came, I was asked to keynote a regional security conference on lessons learned from failed fieldings. I accepted because lessons only exist if we give them shape. The hotel ballroom smelled like coffee and new carpet. I ran my slides twice in the prep room, removed anything that could sound like gloating, kept the emphasis on culture and testing. I noticed him at the first panel of the morning. Ethan sat 3 rows from the back. A notebook open, pen steady. The swagger that once filled his shoulders was gone. His posture was smaller, not broken, attentive. He wrote while others nodded. He asked no questions. He did not look left or right to make sure anyone was watching. When the moderator invited comments, he kept still. The name on his badge was just Ethan Warren with a small firm listed below. No grand title, no slogans. I kept my eyes on the panel and stayed with the content. The rule I set for myself after the hearing still held. Do not turn this into a family play. During the break, I stood near the exit and answered technical questions. Mapping attack surfaces. Separating myths from methods. A young engineer asked about timing channels. I gave him the kitchen lock analogy and watched the light arrive in his face. I felt the particular satisfaction that comes when a difficult concept lands where it can be useful. When I turned, Ethan was 10 feet away, hands in his pockets, gaze on the carpet. He stepped forward, then stepped back as another attendee cut between us with a handshake and a card. I did not move. He waited until the crowd thinned. Then he nodded once, the kind of nod two soldiers use when words will only crowd the air. He did not apologize. I did not ask him to. We shared a second of stillness that felt like a bridge with weight limits clearly posted. He took the seat at the end of my afternoon workshop on audit trails. He filled a page with block letters. He underlined. He drew boxes around the steps that force honesty into a schedule. During the exercise, when I asked teams to map how a bad module sneaks through, he quietly drew a red line where the Phase 4 test had vanished in his world. He did not present. He handed the paper to the facilitator and left it at that. The day closed with a networking hour. Name tags, lukewarm appetizers, and too much neon from the bar. I was packing my laptop when a clean folder slid onto the skirted table. Ethan had placed it there and stepped back a pace. He did not meet my eyes. His voice stayed low. A design package, a hardened communications relay for emergency deployments. Would I look? He added that I could ignore it, that he would accept that. He only wanted the system to be right this time. I did not take the folder immediately. I asked who owned the work and whether there were non-disclosure issues. He said the firm was his. The design was his. The submission to me was personal and off the record. He wanted a sanity check from the person who had refused to let him ship a flaw into a war. The sentence landed with a dull mercy I had not expected to feel. I told him to leave it and pick it up at the registration desk in 2 days. I gave no promise beyond a look. He nodded, turned, and blended into the crowd with the practiced ease of a man who had learned to exit without applause. I slid the folder into my bag and felt its small weight like a measured breath. That evening, I sat at the desk in a quiet room and did not open it. I ironed my jacket for the next day. I set my alarm. I ran the keynote once more to be sure it held to procedure and did not drift toward judgment. The temptation to read was strong. The discipline to wait was stronger. In the morning, I would give my talk. In the afternoon, I would open the folder. And whatever I found, I would answer with the same tools I had always used. Both eyes and my heart. I opened the folder the next afternoon after my keynote. The room was quiet. The carpet absorbed hotel noise. Coffee cooled beside my elbow. A short letter sat on top, dated. No excuses. It asked for a technical sanity check and welcomed a hard answer. Under it lay a design package for a field-deployable communications relay, the kind you fly into a damaged theater when nothing else holds. I scanned the index, then the threat model. The model read like it was written by someone who had been burned and preferred not to be burned again. Timing channels, side channel leakage, privilege escalation, supply chain risks, deployment race conditions. Each risk had controls. Each control had owners. Each owner had a schedule and a verification step. It did not claim perfection. Red lines marked uncertainty and asked reviewers to push. Architecture came next. The crypto stack used approved libraries with correct versions. Signatures matched hashes on the DoD whitelist. Key storage ran in a hardened enclave with auditable calls. Automated key rotation was implemented without vanity. Intervals matched realistic traffic patterns. Randomness sources were documented and tested. Logging captured failures without capturing secrets. Alarms were rate limited so no attacker could drown operators in noise. Testing gates followed. Phase 1 through Phase 5. Entry and exit criteria on each. Independent witness lines for the important ones. Phase 4 was present and thick with cases. Performance under attack. Fuzzing on inter-process calls. Negative tests on every interface once treated as friendly. 2 hard graders had signed the matrices. I knew their ink did not come cheap. The code samples were clean, comments clear, error handling failed safe. No hidden shortcuts. No borrowed code without provenance. I searched for the subcontractor's library from the old disaster and found a single line. Excluded by policy. Replaced with an approved alternative. That note closed a door that never should have opened. At the end sat a rollback plan that did not rely on hope. If deployment failed, the unit would revert within a defined window. Queues would persist. Integrity checks would fire. Operators would have a laminated flow card with numbers and steps. That kind of plan lives in rooms that have seen bad nights and decided to grow up. I wrote margin notes in pencil. 3 questions about hardware tamper detection on the enclosure. 1 small ambiguity in the recovery script regarding partial key rotation during a link flap. 1 additional audit trail on administrative override to keep human hands honest when deadlines cut close. No red alarms, just stones to polish. Then I let the feeling arrive. I was not reading a plea for forgiveness. I was reading work that respected consequence. The old hunger to be respected was still there, but something had shifted. Proof mattered more than applause. Institutions survive on that shift. I closed the folder and slid it into a courier envelope. My reply did not need a speech. It needed a single word that carried respect and a boundary. I typed to the address on the cover. Good. I attached the notes, marked them as suggestions, asked him to collect the folder at the desk as planned. I did not invite a meeting. I did not open a door I was not ready to hold. I left the envelope with the registrar and stepped outside, where afternoon light bounced off rental cars. No triumph, only the quiet relief that follows a lesson kept. He had done the work without fanfare. He had put pride in a drawer and kept receipts. Maybe it would last, maybe it would not. Change is not the speech, it is the calendar. I turned my phone to silent and went for a run. On mile 3, I thought of our mother's sentence, both eyes and my heart, and how rules can rebuild the bones of trust. We did not schedule a talk. We did not pose for a photograph. He picked up the folder. I received an email. Thanks for the notes. Proceeding as marked. That was enough. Forgiveness is not a speech. It is the absence of another wound. I stood at my kitchen counter and thought about gates. Which should open, which must hold. We would not be easy. We would be possible. He would not repeat the mistake. I would keep my boundaries. The circle closed in quiet time, without ceremony, steady, strong enough for the next day. I teach in a small amphitheater where chalk squeaks if the hand rushes. Young officers file in with notebooks, and a readiness that reminds me of my first year in uniform. I tell them this hour is not about heroics. It is about how institutions fail when routine becomes theater. I open the case I call the Unbreakable Code. I give no names because the lesson does not need them. A team promised an encryption system beyond defeat. The pitch sold layers and learning and inevitability. What followed was not evil. It was ordinary haste polished into doctrine. A subcontracted library sits inside the core. The vendor failed an audit for timing attacks. The failure never made it into the status slides. Someone softened potential vulnerability into acceptable operational risk. I draw gates across the board, entry and exit criteria under every gate, signatures where accountability lives, a red X where the Phase 4 test vanished. I describe the hearing room when the air goes thin, how the word unbreakable never survives a transcript, how paper, time-stamped and witnessed, carries more truth than any promise shouted from a stage. A hand goes up. A lieutenant asks whether family made the work harder. I answer without heat. Love can cloud judgment. It can also make you insist on safety when pride would settle for a show. Duty is the frame that keeps feelings from knocking over the furniture. Another hand rises. What saved the mission? Process saved it. Checklists saved it. People who refused to sign fiction saved it. We underline a phrase on the board. Evidence beats narrative. I show a threat model that names timing channels and side channels, owners assigned, dates set, verification steps that do not bend. We talk about writing and why adjectives weaken reports, why verbs like observed, verified, replicated, and mitigated build trust. Someone asks what to do when a senior officer says, "Need it now." I say, honor urgency with sequence, not shortcuts. You can move fast and be thorough. You cannot be thorough if you skip the one test that would have caught the flaw you fear. When pressure rises, repeat the sentence that has saved me more than once. I will sign when the gate is green. If a schedule cannot survive oversight, the schedule is the risk. I close with the part they will carry into rooms I will never see. Complex systems fail for simple reasons. Humans like shortcuts, language slides, pride cells. The antidote is not cynicism, it is craft. Know your gates, know your owners, keep receipts, verify what you inherit, challenge what you cannot verify. When doubt arrives, slow down and look again. Look with both eyes, and with your heart. Then I give them the line my mother gave me at a kitchen table, and that a sealed hearing later confirmed. Sometimes what defeats us is not that it is too complex, but that it is too simple to believe. They write it. After class, an officer waited by the aisle with his notebook clutched. "Ma'am, I keep being told I ask too many questions. Now I think that is a strength." He said it without apology. His voice carried the precise mix of hope and caution I recognize from every doorway where a career begins. I told him that questions are guardrails when answers come wrapped in certainty. He smiled. He asked for one practical habit he could start tomorrow. Carry a checklist you wrote yourself. Add the question that would have embarrassed you last year. Ask it before you sign. He wrote that down and thanked me as if I had given him a tool and not a permission slip. When the room emptied, I erased the board and left the faint red X, where Faye's wife had once vanished. The chalk dust smelled like Sunday newsprint. The memory came back clean. My mother at the kitchen table, the puzzle page unfolded, the line of symbols where letters hid behind shapes. Ethan hunched over the pencil, racing. I counted occurrences and waited for the click that means a key fits. My mother's hand, warm on my shoulder, set the rhythm of patience. Both eyes and your heart. That sentence forged the hinge that held later years. It kept me steady in rooms where pride tried to buy speed. People think training starts in a lab. Sometimes it starts with a parent who knows that winning is less important than learning how to look. I gathered my things and felt the weight of the marker in my palm. Classrooms change. Ranks change. The lesson is stubborn. Most failures are not mysteries. They are accumulations. A softened noun here, a missing signature there, a gate treated like a guideline, a schedule treated like a god. The young officer's sentence stayed with me as I checked the lights and locked the door. He thought he was a problem because he raised his hand too often. He was, in fact, a solution looking for the right room. I walked past the window where the city held to its sun and thought about the puzzle page again. The symbols had looked complicated until I learned the alphabet hidden inside. When that alphabet appears now, it wears budgets instead of stars. The trick has not changed. Read carefully, count honestly. Refuse to pretend complexity is wisdom. In the military or in life, you do not need to shout to prove you are right. Stand steady and wait for the moment. Before we say goodbye today, tell me where you are watching from. Is it a quiet morning with coffee, or a late night where stories like this keep you company? Share in the comments. I read everyone with gratitude. If this story touched your heart, consider subscribing. Join a community that believes in kindness, healing, and second chances. Wherever you are, carry this story. Sometimes the miracle waits until the heart is truly ready.